You're listening to Scaling Up Services, where we speak with entrepreneurs, authors, business experts, and thought leaders to give you the knowledge and insights you need to scale your service-based business faster and easier. And now, here is your host, business coach Bruce Eckfeldt.
Are you a CEO looking to scale your company faster and easier? Check out Thrive Roundtable. Thrive combines a moderated peer group mastermind, expert one-on-one coaching, access to proven growth tools, and a 24/7 support community. Created by Inc. award-winning CEO and certified scaling up business coach Bruce Eckfeldt, Thrive will help you grow your business more quickly and with less drama. For details on the program, visit eckfeldt.com/thrive. That's ECKFELDT.com/thrive.
Welcome, everyone. This is Scaling Up Services. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. And our guest today is Deb Gabor, and she is founder of Soul Marketing. She's also author of Branding is Sex, Get Your Customers Laid and Sell the Hell Out of Anything, which I love. She's also author of Irrational Loyalty, and we're going to talk a little bit about branding, about loyalty, about how we can drive customer engagement, customer loyalty through branding, through strategy. I'm excited about this. A lot of great content, a lot of great ideas. I've had a chance to hear Deb speak a couple of different times, and so I'm excited for her to have this conversation with me. So with that, Deb, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So why don't we start with a little bit of your background? Like, how did you get into branding? How did you get into loyalty? What was the background that got you into this space?
I've been doing this in some form or fashion for my entire adult life. I like to tell people that I was an accidental entrepreneur, and that's because I'm a really crappy employee.
Unemployable, as you like to say.
Yes, exactly. It was like sort of manifest destiny. It's not that I have problems with authority. I just have problems with authority when it isn't me. So
other people have
everything. So everything was pointing towards, me kind of having my own thing. So my career is bifurcated by the half that I spent working for other people and then the half that I spent working for other people, but working for myself in my own services business. So I grew up in the technology industry, mostly working on marketing and brand and product management, product marketing, communications, that kind of stuff, for very, very, very high-tech organizations. So my very first job out of college, I worked in Bell Labs. And this is germane to the conversation because this is where this whole branding methodology really originated. So if you can imagine, I worked at a place that was so high-tech that the people who were working next to me, some of them were actually Nobel Prize-winning scientists. Wow. And the nuances of making emotional connections with people, especially in a world where you're selling like super, super high-tech telecommunications and data communications products, mostly to other providers of telecommunications and data communication services, so like the carriers, et cetera, the nuance of making deep emotional connections and creating meaning that moves people's hearts, minds, and wallets was something that was largely lost on a high-tech audience. Yeah. And so, through the process of working at Bell Labs, and I was there through, some really interesting business things that were happening to 3 new companies. And then I went to work for a number of technology startups, mostly on the hardware side of the business, but I worked in the services part of the hardware sides of the business. So I've always had kind of a passion for business, but these were companies that were household name brands in the technology industry, both on the consumer and the B2B side of it. And so I enjoyed that. And then I had an opportunity to work for an agency. I went to the agency side of the business. I did that for a very short period of time, running research and consulting, brand research and consulting for companies in the technology industry. Mm-hmm. And that's where I discovered I was a really, really crappy employee. And then in 2003, I thought, you know what? There's so much value in what I do. No company out there that can constrain me. So I hung a shingle with the idea that I was just going to be an independent consultant. And then the next thing I knew, I had like all these incredible clients that were coming to me who needed the voodoo that I do. And I had to start hiring helpers. And then I woke up one day and I had a company. Yeah. So that's kind of the journey. I never set out to do this, but I sure am glad that I did.
Yeah. Not an uncommon story. I think, a lot of people end up becoming business owners, business founders, kind of, accidentally or sideways, as I like to say. They kind of wake up one morning and realize they've got a business going.
Well, the common thread is that like my entire career has been, in some kind of services, right?
Yeah.
Like I love the human aspect of the delivery of a brand promise. That's always like really, really ignited me. And I personally, like me as a human being, I'm on a mission to create $1 billion worth of business value for other people's businesses, like other people's entrepreneurial ventures and things, by helping them create that condition of irrational loyalty. So it suits me very well. So I love that your content is focused specifically on services businesses.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a sector that it's generally not necessarily easy to start, but it doesn't require a whole lot of capital. Oftentimes, you can kind of get businesses up and running and services fairly easily, but they tend to be very difficult to scale. I mean, both in terms of figuring out the service model and really kind of process, making that a process and figuring out how to scale that, but also people, right? Because if you're a service-based business, you're delivering value through your people, and unfortunately, people are people. They're very dynamic. They're mercurial. They have lots of differences. It's hard to make cookie cutters out of your employees. So, and it creates all these challenges. So that's really the why we focus on that here. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about branding, about loyalty. Give us some kind of grounding definitions on some of these things. When we talk about building a brand, when we talk about creating loyalty, what are we really speaking about? What is the topic?
So when I talk about brand, I talk about brand with a capital B. There's big B branding, which is like the underlying brand foundation, mm-hmm. the strategic foundation of your business, the core DNA of your business. It intertwines really well with like the scaling up methodology because it relies a little bit on your core values, your core purpose, your mission, your vision, the relationship that you have with customers. So that's the internally facing piece of that. But then you take that, it's a construct that's made up of the part that you own, which is the brand identity that I just talked about, mm-hmm. but then the part that customers own, which is the brand image. And ideally, you want something where the brand identity, the brand image are completely aligned. A brand is the sum total of like all of those various touch points that your brand has with your entire ecosystem. So it's your employees, it's your partners, it's your vendors, it's your customers, it's your investors, it's your advisors, it's like the families of your employees, et cetera. It goes on and on and on. But the brand is basically how you show up. And I always tell people your brand is about them and it's not about you. And so like I encourage people who are listening to this, like if you want to really know if you're doing this right, go to your website. And if the first word on your website is we or your company name, I can tell you this for free, you're doing it wrong. So your brand is about other people. And, ultimately the promise that you make to them about how their lives and their world is going to be elevated through the use of your brand.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think it's I think the important part for me in that is this. It's what the customer and the employee or the stakeholder, the person feels. It's not what you want. So,
right.
You can want all sorts of things, but at the end of the day, the brand is defined by your customers, about the person receiving it, not your strategy.
Yeah.
I guess where do people typically get that wrong, or what are the mistakes or kind of the mistaken sort of thinking or approach to this that most companies misstep on when it comes to branding? Most
companies misstep on branding when they spend all of their time and energy talking about, their bells and whistles and what they think differentiates them. And brands don't compete to be different. They compete to be unique and they compete to be meaningful, right? Mm-hmm. And when brands spend all of their time talking about their speeds and feeds and bells and whistles and the lipstick that they put on the pig, mm-hmm. basically that's like selling an ice cream by saying it's cold and it's sweet. Right? Or selling a car and saying it has wheels and a steering wheel. And it sounds funny, but like I work with a lot of brands that when we first walk in the door, that's how they're marketing themselves. And so like I always think about it in terms of cars because it's something that people can really relate to. So when you buy an automobile, there are baseline requirements for the category, which in order to be considered, let's take luxury SUV, mid-size luxury SUV, because I drive one of those. Yep. It has to have wheels and it has to have a steering wheel and a chassis and some mode of perambulation. It doesn't even have to be a combustion engine anymore because you can buy a hybrid or an all-electric car, right? Yeah. And it has to have, the things that are required by law for you to have. But in order to be considered a mid-sized luxury SUV, you probably have to have leather seats. You definitely have to have Bluetooth, right? Yeah. These are the things that, 5 years ago, if you went to market to buy a new car, Bluetooth was like this newfangled offering that, frankly, you paid extra for. I'm old enough to have purchased a car where power door locks and power windows were an option. I paid $400 for. I paid $300 for a vanity mirror. You wouldn't even think of purchasing a car today without any of those things. So I always lecture to people, if you're marketing on the basis of those things, those options packages that you think make your thing better than everybody else's, today's options packages become tomorrow's standard equipment.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to differentiate yourself on the basis of a feature or some functionality, then you're not creating a brand that is going to be long-term sustainable. The best brands in the world are the ones that become part of the person who uses them. And that's the essence of how I think about branding.
Interesting. Give us an example. Can you give us an example of a brand who has done a good job of, in general, or for you specifically, has become part of you more than just a set of features and benefits?
I'm going to throw out a brand here that's like a little bit of a cop-out because there's a lot of people who love this, but I am irrationally loyal to this brand. And I'm going to have to say that that's Apple. Yeah. And specifically the iPhone. I am so irrationally loyal to Apple that I've had like every iThingy they've ever made. Because you know what? I'm bad at technology. My irrational loyalty, meaning like this brand is so much a part of me, is so strong that a couple of years ago when Samsung came out with like a really, really awesome competitive equipment, which like it looked amazing and it had better performance, better glass, more durability. It cost less. I could get it at a Best Buy store. I didn't have to like go and wait in line at an Apple store. And like, God forbid I should have to spend more than 30 seconds in an Apple store because it makes me twitchy. Yep. Like all of those kinds of things. When I got in there and I held it and I looked at it and I saw all the features and functionality, it seemed like it completely fit everything I needed. And it was $200 less. And I could get it. It was very, very available. Yet when I held it in my hand, as beautiful and amazing as it was, I felt dirty. And meaning that I
you're
can't
cheating.
walk
You were
out
cheating on Apple.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this notion of irrational loyalty, the best brands in the world create this feeling of irrational loyalty, this idea that the brand is so indispensable to the user that the user would feel like they were cheating on it if they were to choose something else. Yeah. Right. And, it's the same reason why every time, like I've moved in Austin, I live in Austin. I've been here for like 22 years. Like I've moved in Austin like 4 times. It's the same reason why every time I move, I use the same moving company. Like I'm irrationally loyal to them. And it's the same reason why when I book hotels, I look for my favorite hotel chains and I try all the time to stay in the same place. I feel like I'm cheating. I'm cheating if I were to choose something else. Even if American Express gives me like 452,000 points to stay in a competitive hotel, I feel gross. And so that having that irrational loyalty relationship is what separates the good brands from the worst. So just to go back to your original question, which was like, where do brands mess up? Yeah. Like, where do companies mess this up? They mess it up by not going far enough up Maslow's hierarchy of needs to make the brand part of a person's self-concept, like part of the person that they are. If you're selling anything, you want to have like Coke level loyalty. And what I mean by Coke level loyalty is like people identify as either Coke people or Pepsi people. It's the ultimate, right?
Yep. Yep. And how do they do that? I mean, is this they sprinkle like powdered oxytocin or something on the product so that when you touch them, that you creates a chemical reaction? I mean, how do you create that kind of thinking, that kind of bond, that kind of emotional reaction, emotional connection to the brands?
So there's a couple things. The first thing they do is that they aim their brand at an ideal archetypal customer. We call this the ideal customer archetype. And I think in the scaling up methodology, they talk about the core customer. This goes beyond the core customer. Like I work with tons of companies who are, who have coaches and who go through this process. And, we have a business coach and, we're working on the 7 strata strategy and the scaling up methodology as well. So I know it very, very well, but I also know like where it stops and branding begins. And so this idea of identifying a core customer is actually creating not just a demographic or firmographic picture of like who is a good customer for your business, but who is the singular customer for whom this business is built, right? 100% lock, stock, and barrel. Like this is who this brand is for, and creating an actual like a picture that goes into hopes, fears, dreams, desires, wants, needs. What do they look like? What do they drive? What kind of shoes do they wear? Where do they live? Where do they go on vacation? What's most important to them? What makes them feel sexy? Like getting inside their head and taking a walk in their shoes to understand, ultimately who is this person and what are they trying to create for their lives, not just through the use of your brand, but just in life in general. So that's the first piece. Figure out who is your ideal archetypal North Star customer, because I'm not really sure who said this, but they always say if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it with amazing accuracy 100% of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so my clients actually draw this. Like I make them put pen to paper and we do it as a group and I make them draw a picture of their crazy ideal customer. And, the very, very creatively advanced ones actually make infographics out of them or make life-size cardboard cutouts that they bring to their meetings. But it humanizes the brand, right? And then the second piece really is kind of the core of the whole thinking about strategic branding methodology. And that is, once you know who that person is, answer these 3 questions. If you do nothing else in branding, do this. The first question is, what does it say about that person that they use this brand? What does it say about them that they hire this plumber? What does it say about them that they fly this airline? What does it say about them that they hire, this CPA for their business or they use this software or whatever? What does it say about them? That's where you take the brand and turn it away from you and turn it on to customers.
Yeah.
And that's really the self-expressive benefits. What does it say about me that I'm an iPhone enthusiast versus I feel like I'm cheating on Apple if I were to use a Samsung? I can tell you, one of my coworkers, he uses an Android phone, and every time he texts me and I see that green bubble come up, it gives me a weird feeling, right?
You're fraternizing with the enemy here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's irrational, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. The second question that we want you to answer about that ideal customer is, what is the singular thing that your customer gets from you that they can't get from anyone else? This is the hardest question to answer, and it's the most important. It's the one where I make all my money, because this is the one where you actually have to go out and you have to do some digging and you have to do some asking and you have to do some discovery and you have to be willing to hear some things that maybe don't make you feel good. Yeah. But, figure out what is the one thing they get from you that they can't get from anyone else. And here's a hint. It's never a feature. It's never a feature. It's always an essence. And I know that this community really likes the Clayton Christensen jobs to be done stuff. Uh-huh. The idea here is figure out what's the milkshake job that people are hiring your brand specifically to do for them. What is the one thing, the singular thing? And then the third question, this is the hero question, this is also the sex question, is how do you make your customer the hero in their own story? It requires you to understand what is their story and what's your promise to them. So they get to get a sidekick in this process of life, and your brand is that sidekick for that particular category. How do you make them the hero? They get to be the protagonist. They get to win. They get the guy, they get the girl at the end. They get the big on-screen kiss and get to walk away into the sunset. How do you enable that for them? If you do nothing else in branding, if all you do is focus on that ideal archetypal customer and then answer those 3 questions, you basically have your brand strategy done.
Yeah. Any examples? Anything you can kind of use to illustrate, answering these 3 questions well, or a brand that has answered these questions well?
Let's see. You know what? Let's do an exercise. Let's pick a brand that you like, and we can kind of pick it apart a little bit.
Sure. Let's choose Patagonia. I'm a big outdoors guy. I've always felt like I pay way too much for Patagonia gear, but yet I still do it.
Yeah. The goal of branding is to make price irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So who do you think is the ideal customer for Patagonia? If you could put your finger on it, who is that brand specifically built for? Is it a man, a woman, something else?
Yeah, I think it's fairly gender neutral. I think there's this kind of combination of outdoors, but also sort of socially enlightened. I don't even think it's socially conscious. I don't think of it as super activist, but very kind of practical. Look at the environment. How do our practices and processes kind of impact the world we live in? I mean, that's kind of my kind of connection to it. I think it's also there's a performance element to it. There's people that want high performance gear, that's not super flashy and techy, but tested by people that are in the community, like real climbers, real adventurers. These products have been to the tops of mountains, to the in the most remote parts of the world. You like that kind of feeling. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So you're not necessarily climbing Mount Everest tomorrow, but you could, right? If you're in your Patagonia gear. And so I think that you're 100% right there. One of the things I notice about your description, you're like a straight A student of this. And also, I know you've heard this before from me and you've worked in and around this a lot, but it's very astute of you to observe, like, these are some of the human characteristics of the person who uses this. This is what they're like. And it's interesting. You talked a lot about beliefs and values, didn't you?
Yeah.
Like, this is somebody who, who values the environment. These are also people, because Patagonia also really values like sustainable business practices, the circular economy. They also value, rights for workers.
Yeah.
They don't want to devalue their brand by selling it on Amazon. There's a lot of things here. People who align with that brand are the ideal customer. So it's this very principled outdoor person. Maybe they're not like, I don't think that their ideal customer is like a hardcore outdoors, high performance person. It really is the normal people like you and me who like to get outside, right? And who have all these values. So that's the ideal customer. So then let's ask the question, you like the brand a lot. What does it say about you, Bruce, that you like Patagonia? What does it say to other people about you?
It's interesting. So I would say that it's that I'm someone who appreciates kind of quality and performance, but also in a non sort of garish, flashy way. I think there's a certain element of kind of practicality and like being out in the world, right? It's not about fashion per se. It's about, having good quality that gets me where I need to go, allows me to kind of do what I want to do, whether it's, being able to get around New York City or whether it's, it has that kind of practicality and functionality around it. Or versatility.
And it also says to me that you're down to earth, that you're, it says that you're both reliable and adventurous. Yeah. Like, you're a guy that is going to help me go on a little journey of self-discovery, right?
Yeah. It's growing up in Minnesota. That's really what it's about.
Yeah, right. That's right. I always say, like, people in Patagonia, that's all my Seattle friends,
yeah, exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and the brand image is like very, very different than, say, like Chanel, right? If we were working on this for Chanel, it'd be a completely different story. So those are the self-expressive benefits. The second question, what's the one thing you get from Patagonia that you can't get from anyone else? So, like, you've chosen Patagonia as a favorite brand. Why is it your favorite? What's the one thing?
Interesting. What is the one thing that I get from Patagonia? You know what? I think there's like this history element to Patagonia that I don't think I can get anywhere else. Like, there's a connection to, a historical climbing community. I mean, the founders were, some of the first real climbers. There's history, there's tradition, legacy that I think I feel with the brand that it's just not, if I go to Hurley or Black Diamond or any of these other ones that, they have qualities, but they don't have the history.
Okay. So, the one thing that you get is this connection to, 100+ year legacy, exploration, right? Yeah. It's your way to be able to pay that off. And then the third question, how does it make you a hero in your own story? Like, in the Bruce story, how are you a hero?
Yeah, well, it lets me go out and do those things. It reminds me that those are important to me. It reminds me that that's an important part of the activities that I do. When I go meet clients, I'm often, tacking on various adventures before and after these things. And I think it's a little gentle reminder about what's important to me.
And then do you ever wear your Patagonia fleece or your puffy jacket or anything like that with clients?
Sometimes, yeah. Even if we're not going to go climb a mountain, I'll put it on, or I'll use it to get around the city or to travel with. There's a certain there's adventure of being out in the wilderness, and then there's adventures of trying to navigate 3 connections on flights, getting around the modern society.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. So that's the essence of it. And so, like, this conversation that we just had right here, working on a brand that's familiar to a lot of people, you can basically take the answers to all those questions, that description of who the ideal customer is, to aim the brand directly at them. So you can say, like, hey, you can draw those people in, right? So, you're not an adventurer, but you're adventurous. And what's important to you is that, like, when you want to get outside, you can you can pay homage to, 100+ year legacy of adventuring history right here in your own backyard, down the street, or at a national park or whatever, right? And then you use that to actually create the messaging for the brand. I mean, it's a really I always laugh at myself about how simplistic the formula is, because I'm like, it's just this, right? Just answer these questions. Just do this. It's that easy. The framework is easy. The work of figuring all that stuff out is a little bit more difficult, especially, if you're a scaling company. Sometimes you don't have the resources. Mostly you don't have the time. Sometimes you don't have the expertise. And then the final reason why it's hard for companies to do this on their own is ugly baby syndrome. We're too close to it. I always tell people, like, nobody loves your brand as much as you do. Don't expect that anyone else is going to love it as much as you do. And by the way, if you're a founder, like, it's even worse.
10 times. Yeah. Interesting. So let's talk about services, because I think that, I've always felt that, one of the challenges of service-based businesses is, you don't have a widget, you don't have, a software product, you don't have a thing that you're giving to the person to actually deliver the value. Everything is through people. Everything is, somewhat ephemeral, is abstract. Why is branding so important for service-based businesses? And to the extent that, it's nuanced differently, what are some of the differences when you go to do branding for services? Yeah, wow. Branding is so much more important for services than it is for any other kind of business. I guess the only other kind of business is going to be like a not-for-profit or even not for profit, or a product business, right? You can't see it, touch it, feel it. It doesn't have heft. It's not something that you can hold in your hand. And it relies upon the most unreliable aspects of our world to deliver the experience. And that's people. Yeah, exactly. Right? Which, it seems like it's counterintuitive. It's like much, much harder to brand a service than it is to brand a product, because you have to worry about consistency and delivery. You have to worry about buy-in. You have to worry about compliance. You have to worry about, like, your product is delivered, like, your entire value proposition and your promise and essentially your product is delivered through human beings, which, like, at last check, human beings are the most irrational and ill-behaved creatures on earth. Or do we always said that business would be much easier without employees or customers? But unfortunately, we need both. Yeah, right. We need both. And so, like, in a services business, I think it's doubly difficult. And what a brand does, like, having that solid foundation of the brand strategy that everyone is bought in on and aligned with and understands exactly what their specific role, going all the way from the receptionist at the front desk to the person who is walking around after hours, like emptying our trash bins, up through the CEO. Every single person in the company needs to be empowered to deliver on that brand experience. They need to understand what it is. They need to understand, like, how do they deliver it specifically, and they need to understand the consequences of not doing it. I always point out, this is becoming an old story now, but it's still my favorite. I always point out the story of United Airlines of the last couple of years, which, if you remember, back in 2017, they pulled that poor Dr. David Dow off an airplane at like 7 o'clock at night on a Friday. I don't know about you. I travel for a living, and I know you travel a lot too. If my ass is in a plane seat at 7:30 on a Friday night, a $200 voucher is not going to get me out of it, right? Yep. And United Airlines, their stated brand promise, like, that is, like, printed on their annual report and in all their materials, their stated brand promise is to be the most caring airline in the world. So it's ridiculous, right? Yeah. If you were the most caring airline in the world, like, you are empowered as that gate agent who caused this entire disaster. You're empowered to do not just the best you can, but whatever it takes to make sure that everybody who wants to be on that plane can be on that plane, and anybody who can be enticed to get off the plane and fly tomorrow or on a later flight is able to do that. She should have been empowered to offer a voucher of up to $10,000 or two round trip first class tickets to any place in the world, right? And so
when you have a brand promise, when you have a strong brand promise and you want to have your company, everybody marching in the same direction to deliver on that brand promise, specifically in a services business, you have to have your brand infiltrate your culture, but also like your behavioral guidelines, your job instructions. You basically have to operationalize brand.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best example. The other example I give is I have a client. Here's where you can use people and the brand experience like to your advantage, where you can zig where everybody else is zagging. So quick story, I have a client, services business. They are about a $30 million travel services company that serves like the rich and famous, like the 1% of the world. These are their customers. And we did a brand exercise with them. And one of the things we do this exercise on brand archetype, where we anchor the brand to a well-known storytelling motif, which is a character archetype. And they determined everybody in the travel industry is the explorer archetype, right? Like that's the whole industry, is taking you on a journey. And one of the things that we learned through our research was that their customers, the reasons that their customers travel and the reasons that their customers use a service like theirs and pay several $1,000s a year for this highly, highly customized, high touch travel planning service is because they are very well aware of and value highly the transformative power of travel. That once you travel to a new place and you have a journey and you experience new things, you are never the same again, which any kind of brand that transforms things needs to be the magician archetype, right? And how this brand showed up, the magician archetype is like, we make things happen. Everything should feel magical. Disney is the magician archetype, right? And the way that they were showing up as a brand was actually as a sage. They were just bombarding customers with information. And the way they were handling travel medicine was very sage-like. So have you ever traveled to a place where you had to get shots before you went? Like someplace in Asia or South America?
East Africa, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you go to do travel medicine, the way this company was doing it, I asked them, I said, how are you letting people know like what they need to do for travel medicine before they go on their safari? And they said, oh, well, we take a bunch of pages out of the medical encyclopedia about dengue fever and yellow fever and malaria, and we send it to them, and then we tell them, go get these shots. And so the way that they were showing up was very much a sage, which the answer to the sage is, find the truth, it'll set you free. But these are people who want to be transformed by their experience. Yeah. And so this is a services company. And I said, I challenge you, how can you create a magician-like experience for these folks since you're about the transformative power of travel? Yeah. And they came up with it immediately. They said, oh, we send a concierge doctor to wherever they are, any place on earth. And I was like, okay, great. And so recently they purchased a concierge medicine service. Yeah. So this idea of the brand and the brand experience and having it delivered by people, it like permeates every aspect of delivering on your brand promise. Like, I don't think that a services business can exist without a brand, truly.
Yeah. So let's talk about one other thing important. How, from a leadership point of view, how do leaders end up kind of impacting or conveying brand, and where does this fall down, and what can leaders do to be more cognizant of how their behaviors, actions are impacting or communicating brand to customers and to stakeholders?
Well, I can tell you this, that it's become increasingly important that brand is driven from the highest place in the organization. As the founder, CEO, the leader of the organization, as the leadership team of the organization, you own it. Like, it is absolutely your responsibility. You own it. You drive it, because you are the living, breathing embodiment, like the walking billboard for this brand, not just to employees, but to customers, to investors, to the general public. We have seen increasingly in like rapid succession this year, there was a record number of CEOs that have been dismissed from their jobs. Yeah. As of the end of September, I saw it was close to 1,100 CEOs had either been invited to pursue excellence elsewhere by their boards or by their investors, or they stepped back or were strongly encouraged to do so, right? Mm-hmm. And mostly because they either were behaving in a way that wasn't in accordance with the values and beliefs and performance and experience of the brand, or they were not valuing or honoring like what the brand values are and what the brand assets are and what the brand really is about. So, I will only, like my company will only work with organizations where we have a relationship with people on the leadership team. I prefer it to be the CEO, not even the CMO. So not even the chief marketing officer or chief revenue officer. Like I want to get as high in an organization as I possibly can, because the best brands in the world take root at the top and are delivered throughout the entire organization where the entire experience is 100% consistent. I mean, think about it this way, like Uber, for instance. Like this is a brand that the brand itself has faced so much controversy, both because of bad behavior on the part of the founder and the leadership team in this like ugly sort of like bro culture that ignited there. But also if you have one bad egg in the dozen, like the one guy, the one Uber driver who opens fire on his passenger in the back seat, like it spoils like the entire take. And it only takes one negative action from anybody at any level in the organization to take an entire business down. That day after United Airlines made their like little 140 character Twitter apology for pulling David Dow off an airplane, their stock lost in one afternoon $355 million worth of value. Yeah. So, and that was like, I can trace all of that back. I mean, I'm sure that there are reasons why that employee, the gate agent, wasn't trained and she called security and all that kind of stuff and whatever. And she was a contractor. But the real reason was that one person was not truly empowered to deliver on the promise of the brand.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for the leadership, it magnifies everything by, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, if they're behaving in ways that are contrary to brand.
CEOs, you own it.
Yes, exactly. Radical personal accountability. That's my mantra about this stuff. So if people want to find out more about you, about the books, about your speaking, about the work that you do, what's the best place to get that information?
I think the best place to get that information, just go to debgabor.com, and it's DEBGABOR, debgabor.com. You can go there. You can see information about the books. You can also, like, if you click on the various things that are book related on that site, you can download free chapters from both Branding is Sex and Irrational Loyalty. Branding is Sex is like the how-to book, and then Irrational Loyalty is the book that wrote itself about the brand disasters of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And then like there's videos up there, and then you can also ask to be added to a list and find out, where I'm speaking. You can follow me on social media. I have a public profile on Facebook. Just search on Deb Gabor. I'm on Twitter, Deb_Soul. Like the sun in Spanish. You can find me on LinkedIn. I love connections. I love when people write to me. I love when people like want to just, shoot the breeze about branding. Yeah. I'm literally obsessed with this. Like I can't do anything else with my life. So like bring it.
I love it. Yeah. Highly encourage people to check them out. I'll put the links and the handles and stuff in the show notes so people can click through and get that. Deb, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time. Great insight and always fun conversation with you. Thanks for taking the time.
Awesome. Thank you.
You've been listening to Scaling Up Services with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at scalingupservices.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at scalingupservices.com/newsletter.